Twilight was doing her best to understand what the 3 pictures before her meant. Each picture was a distorted mess of colors and shapes. At times, she thought she had been able to make out a vague shape of a pony, or some other shape that she could identify as an object. But it quickly moved back into being a disoriented blob.
Ugh, I can't make heads or tails of this.
Twilight groaned as she looked back and forth.
How exactly does this spell work? This is my 2nd time doing it, and I'm still confused.
The book didn't explain any further than how to perform the spell and its purpose. Was it supposed to be easy to figure out? Should something have been obvious to her? There were no instructions on how to interpret the pictures or what she could do to help. It really seemed like she was purposely being kept out, as if she wasn't allowed to see what each of her friends was experiencing.
If I had something to write with, I could maybe take better notes, but I have nothing to compare this to. I only have the other 2 pictures. Ugh, I can't learn like this.
Twilight groaned, sitting down as she stared a little frustrated at the pictures. She wanted nothing more than to figure this out and learn so she could be more helpful to her friends. But without a frame of reference, it seemed pointless. Just as the frustration was starting to get to her, each of the pictures began to radiate with a bright white light. Twilight tried to look at this development, but the light became too much for her to bear. She covered her eyes, just as she felt the familiar tug of the spell ending. She was dragged backwards, out of the spiraling darkness that carried the 3 paintings, before finding herself thrusted back into reality. Twilight groaned as she rubbed her forehead. It was an unsettling feeling to be pulled around like that.
Every pony okay?
She asked, opening her eyes to look at her 3 friends.
Yay! It worked! We're back! Ha! Take that, you creepy world, you!
That was really eye-opening. So, the spell worked? You were able to find out why you were having nightmares, Fluttershy?
Twilight asked, looking at her friend curiously. Fluttershy felt herself become the center of attention, as every mare looked at her in anticipation. She softly blushed.
Well, don't leave us in suspense. What was it?
Rainbow asked, eager to find out.
Whoa, hold on, Dashy.
Pinkie cautioned, stepping closer.
If it's anything like me finding out I lost my sister, we shouldn't force her to say it if she isn't ready. Though I will admit I'm kind of curious as to what it was. It's probably something hug-worthy.
Oh,
Fluttershy rubbed her leg awkwardly with her hoof.
Well, tell you what. There's something I need to do. Something I need to take care of. Then I can tell all of you. I hope.
And that's completely understandable.
Pinkie said, embracing Fluttershy in a big hug.
Just know that whatever it is, we're always here for you. Yeah. Sorry. I didn't mean to sound so pushy. Just tell us when you're ready.
Rainbow smiled supportively.
Thank you, all of you.
Fluttershy said, smiling, with tears on the edge of her eyes.
I don't know what I'd do without you girls.
She embraced Pinkie Pie back.
Well, I'm glad I could help.
Twilight smiled.
Yeah, about that.
Pinkie said, letting go of Fluttershy and looking at the other 2.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement here, Pinkie.
Yes, I do think we are.
Twilight?
Huh?
The 3 mares before her each took a deep breath, before in one big cry they unanimously shouted,
Don't ever use that spell again! So, why are we going to Cloudsdale again?
Rainbow Dash asked curiously, looking at Fluttershy as the two of them were flying towards the city in the clouds.
Well, I guess I can tell you.
Fluttershy said, before letting out a big sigh and smiling.
I'm going to see my father.
Your father?
Rainbow asked curiously.
I don't think I've met him. Heck, I don't think you've told me much about your family. You always avoid that subject when I ask.
That makes sense.
Does this have something to do with that freaky nightmare version of Ponyville?
Rainbow asked hesitantly, the gears turning in her head as she thought.
It does.
Fluttershy said softly, trying to not alarm Dash. She wasn't ready to say too much about what she saw. Not until she at least confronted her father. Rainbow looked at Fluttershy as they flew quietly, waiting for her to say more, though she realized it wasn't coming.
You are going to explain things, right? Pinkie didn't explain anything more than she had lost her sister to some serial killer. She didn't mention the monsters in that town. I really want to know what happened to you, Fluttershy. After you got separated from us, I was really worried.
I promise, Dash. I'll tell you everything. Just promise me you won't think I'm a monster.
Rainbow looked shocked, as if she was almost offended by the very idea.
How could I ever think that? You're the nicest, kindest, most gentle pony in all of Ponyville. Heck, maybe in all of Equestria. How could I think that you're a monster?
Rainbow shook her head, confused.
Thank you, Dash.
Fluttershy held back a tear from spilling.
We're almost there.
Fluttershy said, as they were now flying close to the Cloud City. Cloudsdale was as busy as it ever was, with Pegasi flying all around. Some were working on new construction, some were delivering packages, some were simply out enjoying the weather, while others seemed to be in a hurry. It was a perfectly normal day in Cloudsdale. Fluttershy looked at the schoolhouse in the distance as they flew past it. She could hear the familiar bell ringing even from that distance, as the schoolhouse suddenly poured out with young, excited foals that were eager to be out of the school for the day. It brought a smile to Fluttershy's face. Seeing all the happy faces of youth seemed to lift her spirits.
There it is, the place my father works, Cloudsdale General.
Fluttershy said, after a few more minutes of flying, pointing to a large white building with a large red cross on it. It had several Pegasi flying in and out of the building, some healthy, some sick, some with bandages on their limbs. There was an emergency vehicle that sat parked next to it that could be pulled by a team of Pegasi should an emergency call be made.
Your father is a doctor?
Rainbow asked as they sat down just outside the front doors before walking inside.
You could say that.
The lobby was large, very large. There was a large open space above their heads for Pegasi to fly around, a large fountain in the middle that seemed to have a few bits floating in its depths, a receptionist desk that had a lot of ponies waiting to check in, a waiting area for ponies to fill out paperwork and wait for them to head where they were needed. And the most noticeable part of this room was the very large picture over the receptionist desk of a light amber Pegasus with a dark red mane and a white lab coat with imposing blue eyes. Underneath the picture was a plaque, though it was difficult to read from afar.
Well, that's a large photo,
Rainbow said, chuckling at the size of it.
They must really like that, Doctor.
Well, he has saved hundreds of ponies' lives. He's the best doctor in the whole hospital.
Fluttershy stopped where she was walking, making Dash stop and look back at her curiously.
His name is Lance Strongshy, and He's my father.
Rainbow's mouth hung agape before looking quickly at the large picture, then back at Fluttershy, before doing this several times in disbelief.
You mean your father is the Lance Strongshy? He's like the most famous doctor in all of Cloudsdale. I mean, even I've heard of him. It was said once that during a terrible lightning storm that injured at least 30 ponies, that Lance was able to save them all, when all the other doctors combined couldn't even save them.
Yes, I'm familiar with that day.
Fluttershy said, nodding slowly, all of her memories from her foalhood having now returned. She could remember almost everything about it.
Seriously, he's always been one of the best doctors. I've heard that he only got better once he poured all of his passion into studying medicine after his wife died of this disease.
Rainbow Dash stopped in her tracks as the realization hit her like a ton of bricks. She was speaking about Fluttershy's mother.
Fluttershy, I had no idea. I'm sorry.
It's okay, Dash.
Fluttershy smiled sadly as she walked past Dash, heading to the counter.
There's a lot I have to tell you. You'll understand soon.
Hello, welcome to Cloudsdale General. How can I
The nurse behind the desk began to say, having been nose deep in paperwork, before looking up in shock, seeing Fluttershy standing there.
Hello, Nurse SoftCure. Covering for the receptionist today?
Fluttershy offered as genuine as a smile as she could, looking at the white-coated Pegasus with the blonde mane. After all, it was the first time she had seen her personal full-hood nurse since she had last visited the hospital so many years ago. Nurse SoftCure narrowed her eyes immediately, giving Fluttershy a rather nasty glare.
What are you doing here?
The nurse almost hissed. Rainbow Dash raised an eyebrow at the nurse's behavior. This seemed very rude, considering she was talking to the daughter of the best doctor in the hospital.
I'd come to see my father today, if he's not busy, that is.
The nurse's hooves banged hard against the desk. Almost every pony turned their heads to look at this, having not expected a loud bang in the middle of a hospital. Nurse SoftCure looked around quickly before offering a weak smile and a soft laugh, as if it had been on accident. The other Pegasi just seemed to shrug before continuing on with their duties. Once she was sure no pony was paying full attention to them, she went back to glaring at Fluttershy.
So what? After all these years, you just come waltzing in here, not only expecting an audience, but expecting me to believe that's all you're here for?
SoftCure was trying to yell, but her voice came out in a harsh whisper.
Hey, who do you think you're talking to?
Rainbow Dash said, feeling her fur starting to stand up on end, but was stopped by a hoof put out by Fluttershy.
I swear to you, Miss Cure, I'm only here to talk to my father.
Fluttershy smiled in the face of hate that was coming from the nurse.
Oh, yeah, like I believe that. You're just here to smear Lance's good name, aren't you? Try to interfere with his life-saving work because of some bitter vengeance you want?
Again, Rainbow Dash went to speak up, but was stopped by Fluttershy.
You can accompany me if you want. I really want nothing more than the chance to talk to my father. I won't say a word to any pony else, I promise.
Nurse SoftCure just glared at Fluttershy, but seemed to be thinking the situation over in her head. Her eyes wandered over to Rainbow Dash, who seemed to be giving her glaring daggers back. It took a while, but the nurse finally responded.
Fine. I'll escort you to his office.
The nurse got up from her sitting position behind the desk before spreading her wings. She began to fly down one of the hallways towards the air paths that fly to the upper levels.
Jeez, what's her problem?
Dash growled as the two of them followed after the nurse.
It's a long story. I'll tell you later.
Fluttershy smiled softly. Rainbow Dash didn't seem pleased, but listened to Fluttershy as they flew. The nurse directed them up several stories before stopping at the 9th. She flew down a long hallway that barely had a soul in it. They only passed a single other Pegasi as they drew closer.
Here, his office.
SoftCure stopped outside one of the doors, turning to face the two mares.
I'll let him know you're here to see him.
She explained, before turning to knock on the door.
Come in.
Nurse SoftCure opened the door and walked in before closing the door behind her.
I don't like the feeling of this, Fluttershy.
Rainbow whispered her displeasure with the situation.
Something doesn't feel right.
I understand, Dash. I promise this'll be over soon. Just let me talk to my father in private for now, please. If I need you, you'll know.
Fluttershy nuzzled against Rainbow Dash for support.
I'd rather go in there with you. But if you say so.
Rainbow softly nuzzled Fluttershy back. The door opened once more, Nurse SoftCure coming out.
He'll see you now,
she said, standing next to the door, glaring at the two of them.
Thank you.
Fluttershy smiled softly before walking up to the door. She took in a deep breath to draw her strength before carefully opening the door and walking inside. The office wasn't too different from the last time she had seen it. There was still a desk with books lining the walls, many of the books stacked on top of each other around the office, as if recently read. One book laid open on the desk, as it was currently in the middle of being read. There, behind the desk, looking up at her with tired eyes, was the familiar amber coat and dark red mane of her father. He looked up at her, almost as if in disbelief that she was actually there, standing before him after all these years.
Hello, Father. It's me, Fluttershy.
Fluttershy said as nicely as she could.
So you're here.
Lance let out a soft sigh, moving out from behind his desk, walking around to get a better look at her.
You've certainly grown a lot since I last saw you.
He looked her up and down, scanning her.
You resemble your mother so much now.
Lance turned his head away, closing his eyes.
Why are you here?
I came to talk about what happened between us.
What's there to say? You killed your mother, and I hurt you because of it. You remember all that, don't you? So, what's there to say?
I guess I came to apologize.
Fluttershy smiled a sad, soft smile.
Apologize?
Her father said, looking almost confused as he turned to his daughter.
I'm sorry I killed Mom. I can never take back what I've done, and no amount of apologies will bring her back. But I did kill her, and so I'm sorry.
There was silence in the room. Fluttershy could feel the cold stare of her father as he looked at her, as if trying to figure out what was going on.
Are you trying to seek redemption now? Trying to make up for what you did so long ago? After all these years, you came back for this?
Anger was starting to rise in the back of his throat.
I guess that's not all. I also came to let you know that I forgive you as well.
This seemed to stop the older stallion where he stood.
You punished me for what I did to Mother, and I still feel that it was a worthy punishment.
I did a terrible thing, so it's only befitting that I had a fitting punishment, and I don't hold any anger for what you did to me. In fact, I was able to find a wonderful life thanks to what you did. I have so many wonderful friends who love me so much now. I care for the animals in Ponyville, you know? I put the knowledge I learned from your medical books to use.
Fluttershy smiled happily as she thought back to her life in Ponyville.
I was even able to find love in Ponyville. I don't know where it's going to head, but it's a journey. I'm going to enjoy it all the way. And I wouldn't have met my love if you hadn't done what you did. I owe everything in my life to you, Father, and I want to thank you.
She gave a small bow.
Thank you for everything.
Lance just stared at his daughter. He could still remember the night that his wife had been taken from him, the monster that had ended his wife's life. He remembered how much pain and suffering he had inflicted on that monster. How after that he'd put so much work into studying medicine and practicing his craft so that he could save any pony, regardless of their condition or disease. But now, that very monster was bowing before him, thanking him for everything that had happened in her life, apologizing for taking the very mare that had brought him the greatest amount of happiness he had ever known. He gritted his teeth as he felt anger beginning to swell inside of him. He stared at her with maddening intent. He saw her slowly lift her head to look at him with a smile. That smile, it felt like it was digging into his very soul. He took a step forward as he took a deep breath out of his nose, raising his hoof into the air. He wanted to strike her. He wanted to make her hurt once more. And he wanted her to know that what happened still tore at his soul as he looked into the face of every patient he had ever saved. Fluttershy smiled softly. Looking at her father, she closed her eyes, ready to be struck. She would take any punishment he seemed befitting for her, as she always had. It was the only thing she could do to make amends for what she had done, for having taken her mother out of this world. She waited for the blow, expecting it to come. But the strike never came. Instead, what Fluttershy felt next surprised her. Her father gently placed his hoof down on her back, drawing her in close to embrace her, wrapping his hooves around her. She blinked in surprise when she started to feel him shake. She wasn't sure how to react. It was then that she felt something cold and wet hit her back. He was crying. Her father was crying as he embraced her. Fluttershy couldn't help herself. She moved her hooves up around her father and hugged him back, closing her eyes as she let him cry into her as he needed. The two of them stood there in that embrace for what seemed like an eternity. When her father finally broke away from it, rubbing his face as he turned away from his daughter.
Fluttershy,
he finally said, after clearing his throat.
Yes?
She said curiously.
I think it's best if we never see each other again. Please, don't ever come visit me again.
All right, I understand. Just know that I love you, Dad.
I love you too. Now, get out of my office.
Fluttershy didn't need to be told twice. She gave one last bow before moving to his door and opening it, heading out.
Well, that was a quick visit.
SoftCure said, looking at Fluttershy curiously. Fluttershy's emergence was the only thing that had stopped the constant glare battle between SoftCure and Rainbow Dash.
Yes, but don't worry, Miss Cure. You won't ever be seeing me again.
What? Really? You're not gonna smear his name?
Miss Cure, I understand now. You did what you did because you didn't want anything bad to happen to my father. If something had happened, he couldn't have saved all the lives he's saved over the last few years.
Fluttershy smiled, as SoftCure just turned her head, as if she was being stabbed by Fluttershy's words.
I don't blame you. He saved so many lives. The one he hurt seems insignificant in comparison.
Get on with it.
I'm sorry. I just needed to say it. Please, have a wonderful life and look after my father.
She gave a bow before walking off.
Fluttershy, what in the hay was that all about?
I guess I can explain to you now, Dash. But let's go somewhere more private first.
Rainbow and Fluttershy landed on the top of a hill in the middle of a large field that expanded far out into the horizon. One could see the mountains in the distance and the flowers blooming in the field below. It was a beautiful sight, one that was tranquil, without another pony around to be seen.
This seems like a good place.
Fluttershy smiled as she laid herself down, turning to look over at the nearby forest.
You know, over there is where I fell from Cloudsdale and learned my special talent of taking care of animals.
Huh. It is, isn't it?
Rainbow Dash sat down next to Fluttershy, looking at the forest. The sight did bring back fond memories, but that's not what she was concerned about at the moment.
Okay, Fluttershy, will you tell me now that we're alone? That nurse was glaring daggers at you, and I didn't like it one bit. Also, what did you see in that other Ponyville that warranted this trip to Cloudsdale?
Fluttershy could only offer a sad smile as she felt the wind blow through her mane. She closed her eyes as she began to speak.
I suppose you know that my mother died of a disease, right?
Yeah, I was too young to remember, but it was pretty big news one day. And, of course, every time that I heard ponies talk about him, they always seemed to mention how he tragically lost his wife. And because of that, it made him want to become an even better doctor.
Well, then, here's the truth, Rainbow Dash. My mother didn't die of a disease.
Rainbow looked at her curiously.
It's true that she was sick with a disease to which we had no cure, and it likely would have killed her eventually, but that's not what killed her. Or you see, I killed her. I killed my own mother, Rainbow Dash.
Rainbow Dash's mouth fell open once more as she stared at Fluttershy. Fluttershy wasn't even looking at her. She was just staring out into the field with a sad, soft smile. Any question of doubt that ran through her head was hit by that sad look. She wasn't lying. Fluttershy had actually done what she said.
But why? Why would you? What would drive you, the kindest pony ever, to kill your mother?
She asked me to.
What? You mean your mother asked her young daughter to kill her?
Fluttershy just slowly nodded her head.
Fluttershy, that doesn't make you the killer here. You were too young to know the difference. And if she made you kill her, then you had no ability to stop yourself. You didn't kill your mother, she killed—
I did kill her, Rainbow Dash. Even if she told me to, and as a child I had listened to her, I still had enough sense in me to know what I did was wrong, that it didn't feel right. But I chose to not want to disappoint my mother. I took the knife she gave me and I stabbed her repeatedly. No matter how you look at it, the motives or the reasons, my mother died because I stabbed her multiple times. If I hadn't had the knife, if I hadn't moved my legs in the stabbing motion, if I hadn't listened to her, then she'd still be alive today.
Fluttershy's smile stayed on her face. She maintained her composure, trying to force herself to be okay with everything she said.
I'm simply a monster, Rainbow Dash.
No!
Rainbow shouted, stomping the ground before grabbing Fluttershy by the shoulders, much to her surprise, and turning the sad-looking Pegasus to face her.
You're not a monster! Your mother forced you to do that, Fluttershy! As the most gentle pony in all of Equestria, you're not capable of murder unless you didn't know what you were doing! You're not a monster!
Fluttershy looked in shock for a moment, before smiling gently. She was so happy that Rainbow cared for her so deeply, despite having admitted her monstrous truth to her. She could feel tears burning at the edges of her eyes, but she held them back as she closed her eyes.
Well, my father told me I was.
This seemed to shut Rainbow Dash up again as she stared at Fluttershy in shock.
He didn't just tell me I was a monster. He punished me as the monster I was. After all, you don't argue with the best doctor in all of Cloudsdale. He knows what's best for you. I don't have any scars because he knew what he was doing. But I visited the hospital so often because of his punishments. That's where Nurse SoftCure comes in. She was my father's head nurse. Whenever I came in for one of my accidents, she was the one who helped me. However, she was loyal to my father. If I had tried to tell her that my father was the one who had been doing this to me, she only hurt me in return. And I understand why now. She was protecting the people my father was caring for. I remember passing by the rooms of his patients one day. At the time, he was attending to a cancer patient who all the other doctors said had no chance of healing her, but my father said he wasn't going to give up on her till the very end. Another patient, a complicated organ replacement that other surgeons were too afraid to perform because one wrong move would kill her, but my father took it upon himself and saved her life. I saw him smile and laugh and help them. Even after I killed my mother, he never once showed the sign of sorrow to them. So, what else can I be but a monster, Rainbow Dash? I deserved everything that happened to me. I did the unforgivable and killed my mother.
No. No. No, no. No, 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 no!
Rainbow Dash began to scream as she lowered her head. Fluttershy looked at her in surprise. Dash began to shake as she felt tears burning at the edges of her eyes.
Fluttershy, you are not a monster!
Rainbow looked straight into Fluttershy's water-filled cyan eyes.
Even if this is all true, even if you did kill your mother, that doesn't make you a monster. You would never hurt a fly unless you were given no other choice. No other option. Unless your back was to the wall, you would never harm another living being. So stop saying that you are. So stop speaking that you're this horrible pony that deserves to be punished. Because you're not. Because you're the nicest, gentlest, kindest pony that I've ever known.
Rainbow Dash.
Fluttershy muttered quietly, looking at her through sorrowful eyes. The two sat on the grassy hill, looking into each other's eyes as they sat there crying. There were no words to be had at that moment, just the bond that the two mares set up. As the sun began to set in the horizon, between two breathless mares, they shared a deep kiss on that hill. Each mare could feel the passion that radiated from the other through that kiss. It wasn't just a kiss out of longing or lust, or of simple understanding or care. It was a kiss out of deep love, love that was rooted in their hearts. The night sky began to become visible as the two finally broke apart from their kiss, Fluttershy nestling herself into Rainbow's coat.
Thank you, Rainbow Dash.
Fluttershy said quietly. Rainbow Dash just smiled at her mare friend, petting her coat softly. The two stayed that way for a short while. It was Fluttershy that broke the silence between them.
We're not done yet, though.
What?
Rainbow asked curiously, as Fluttershy sat up.
This time, we need to talk about you.
Fluttershy wiped her face as she smiled.
About your dream to be a Wonderbolt.
Oh.
Rainbow Dash grimaced, not wanting to have to bring up that topic just yet. She looked up at Fluttershy, who was smiling at her, then up to the sky, then down to the ground, and gritted her teeth as she closed her eyes before letting out a soft sigh.
I'm not going to.
I want you to try out for the Wonderbolts.
Huh?
Rainbow blinked in confusion.
But I told you before, if I join the Wonderbolts, I'll be abandoning my friends, the ponies I care about.
Rainbow Dash felt like she was shrinking as she spoke.
I'll be abandoning you, Fluttershy.
I've been thinking it over, despite my own thoughts. And there's a 1-year training program, right? Well, as far as I know, they're not allowed to keep you away forever. By law, they must give you opportunities to rest, breaks from working. You get sick days, vacation days, rest days, holidays, and even once you're part of the main flight team, they don't do shows during winter, and not every team member flies during every show. All that downtime you'll have, you can use to spend with us.
Rainbow Dash blinked.
How did you know all that?
Rainbow said, flabbergasted at Fluttershy's level of knowledge of the Wonderbolts. Fluttershy could only laugh.
I remembered most of what you've said about them. I just took important details from each rant and brought them together. I've been listening to you rant about them since we were fillies, Rainbow Dash. I've remembered most of what you've said about them. I just took important details from each rant and brought them together. Just because you'll be gone for a while at a time doesn't mean you'll be abandoning your home or your friends, and you especially won't be abandoning me.
Huh. I hadn't really thought about it like that.
Rainbow contemplated all of this over in her head. In that other Ponyville, it had been presented to her in such a black and white way that she couldn't help but feel what she had been shown was true. But here was Fluttershy mixing the black and white lines, causing it all to become an ambiguous gray blur.
You're right, Fluttershy. You're absolutely right.
Rainbow said, as her enthusiastic grin came back to her face.
Yes!
She cried out, jumping into the air, doing a flip and pumping her hooves into the air.
Yeah! I'm gonna be a Wonderbolt!
That's wonderful, Rainbow Dash. I've come up with my own dream, too. One I want to make come true very soon.
Oh? Well, then what's your dream then, Fluttershy?
Dash flew down to Fluttershy.
I've decided that I'm going to be a mother.
But what? Flutters, I can't give you a child!
Rainbow Dash's wings stopped immediately as she fell to the ground before Fluttershy.
I meant I'd like to adopt a little filly or colt of my own.
Oh.
Rainbow Dash sat up, understanding now.
I don't know, Fluttershy. A foal is a lot of work. A lot more than trying to be a Wonderbolt, that is. Plus, with me being your mare friend, you know I'd help you take care of it.
Rainbow rubbed the back of her head in thought.
I don't know. I don't know if I'm ready for that kind of responsibility.
It's okay, Dash. I wouldn't ask you to do anything you're not comfortable with.
All right. You really have a way of twisting my heart, you know.
Rainbow put a hoof to her face before smiling.
But if a foal is what you really want, I can't say anything but just go for it. But, let's just consider our options first, you know?
Options?
Fluttershy blinked, tilting her head a little.
We could... Well, I'm not really sure what our options are, but this is a really big commitment. So, we should think about it before we rush into anything.
It's alright. All I know is I want to give some little filial gold a wonderful foalhood when I didn't have growing up.
Fluttershy nuzzled up against Rainbow Dash.
I know.
Rainbow let out a soft chuckle as she embraced her mare friend.
Hey, it's getting late. We should probably head back to Ponyville,
Rainbow said as a cool breeze blew through her mane, reminding her of the time.
Alright, let's go.
Fluttershy smiled up at Rainbow. The two of them soon took off from the hill, flying back to Ponyville together.